Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So most of my top 5 lists focus on a general view of solo queue, but I decided to finally make one focusing more on the lower ELO. So for example, in this video we'll be focusing on gold, silver, and bronze. Now that's definitely not to say that they will not work in platinum and above. It's more the fact that these champions' weaknesses will not be abused by lower ELO opponents. So I initially saw Panzer Dragon do a video like this focusing on the jungle champions, and I decided to do one as well for mid lane. Pants, you're okay with that, right?
Yeah man, it's all good.
Alright, so now that we got his approval, let's get right into the video. So very quickly, the question I'll be asking you guys in this video is, which champion do you have the best success with when it comes to solo queue? And if you end up enjoying this type of video, please don't forget to hit that like button. So one very important thing to look at in this type of video is, what is the criteria that I'm using to base this list off of? So essentially, what am I looking for in champions that make them better in lower ELO? Well, for the most part, there'll be 4 different criterias. The first of which is the champion, well, has to be relatively easy to play. This cannot be a mechanically intensive champion. To me, this one is quite straightforward because lower ranked players simply don't usually have the mechanics required to play the more difficult type champions to success. That's not to say that it applies to every low ranked player, but for the majority it usually does. Following that, for mid lane, well, the laning phase should not be something that's difficult with the champion, nor should the champion really struggle in the laning phase. And on top of this, the champion needs to be useful in team fights and not just be a gimmicky type champion, and also needs to scale at least somewhat decently into late game. A lot of champions that are snowbally and close out games very quickly are also very difficult to play because not only can they usually be mechanically intensive, but you need some very good decision making. So a lot of the times the lower ranked games will last a bit longer, so if you have a champion that just naturally works better mid to late game, it's gonna make things a lot easier for you to win the game. But now that you more or less know the criteria, let's go right into the first champion. So Ahri will be starting things off for us, and one thing to keep in mind is this list isn't numbered from best to worst. It'll just be 7 different champions that are good in their own way for the lower ranked games. So when you're done watching the video, you can simply pick which of the champions you think fits your playstyle the best. But going back to Ahri, I mean, this is a champion you'll be seeing and have been seeing very frequently in almost every top 5 list for mid laners. She's just simply way too well rounded. I mean, she's not difficult to play, she has a fairly strong kit, she has escapes, she has chase power, she has push potential, she has life regen with her passive in the laning phase, she has true damage, she has catch potential, she's got AoE damage, she's got single target damage. I mean, this champion doesn't excel at anything, but she's just so good at many different things. And for the most part, it doesn't really matter what rank you're playing in, Ahri is most likely going to be very successful and effective. She pretty much fits every criteria I just mentioned in the video. Now, a very common thing you'll notice in the negative section throughout almost every champion I'll mention is that none of them have escapes pre-level 6. And this is a good example of how I said earlier how people in lower ELO will not capitalize off of champions' weaknesses. And champions that have no escapes tend to usually have quite a bit of damage to make up for that. And whether it's the mid laner you're facing or the enemy jungler, well, chances are they won't be capitalizing off of the weakness of you having no escapes as much as they should be. So in more cases than not, it should work out more in your favor. But either way, Ahri is a fantastic champion to start this list off because, again, she's just so darn well rounded. And here are my recommended runes, masteries, and items if you decide to bring out Ahri. And moving along the list, the next champion I'll talk to you guys about is going to be Lux. Again, should be no surprise, and she's very similar to Ahri at the very moment in the sense that no matter what ELO you're playing in, she's probably going to be effective. Lux is a very simple champion, she's very safe as well, especially if you take the summoner barrier. You have a ridiculous amount of catch potential, you have an AoE slow type ability that also clears minion waves with ease, you have a W ability that grants you a fantastic shield and gives you almost the freest assist you can ask for. She has very long range spells, so you can cast them from afar and feel very safe. Her teamfight potential is ridiculously high, again because of the utility with the shield, the catch potential, and the sheer amount of damage within her kit. Her ultimate deals full damage to every champion hit, it procs her passive, it has a very low cooldown, it has very long range. For the most part, I mean, this champion is just very strong, very easy to play, also very safe. So if you're not feeling 100% confident in a certain matchup, or you want to just have an easy game for the most part and not worry about maybe losing lane, Lux is definitely the champion to play. The negatives, which is something you'll be seeing quite often like I said, no escapes in her kit, and yes, at the end of the day she is purely skill shot oriented. But having said that, I mean, chances are if you miss one skill shot, well, you can probably just throw out another in just a couple of seconds. So you get many tries, and it's really not that bad if you miss maybe once or twice. And just like with Ahri, here are my recommended runes, masteries, and items if you play Lux in solo queue. And next on the list we have Malzahar. Now I'm sure a lot of you watching this will most likely agree with this. When it comes to a champion that has a lot of damage, is easy to play, has a strong laning phase, well, Malzahar without question is a champion that will come to your mind. He's known to have one of the more boring laning phases only just because of how simple and strong it really is. He can start pushing waves in really hard level 2 and especially level 3 once his E is level 2 and once he has a Q ability and his passive ready to go. He has ridiculously good scaling in his ultimate, his W's percent damage, so he can scale into late game quite well. His ultimate is among the easiest abilities to use in the game because, well, you point, you click, and you're locking down a target while dealing respectable damage, especially if your E is on them with your W under them and you have the minion attacking their face. Or another way to look at it is, if someone on the enemy team is fed, and especially if they're an assassin or maybe a squishy, or even honestly a tank, you press your R button on them, your team focuses them down, hopefully, and then you get the kill for free. There's nothing wrong with this champion being as easy as he is. In fact, it's actually quite good that champions like him exist because not everyone is all about having great mechanical skills. Some people might have good decision making, but not so hot mechanical skills, and that's where Malzahar comes in. Again, since this list is also for lower ranked players or just the ELO ranges, the chances of the enemy players to buy Quicksilver Sash just to counter Malzahar's ultimate is probably not very high. So if you're guaranteed to ult whoever you want and actually have them CC down for the duration of your ultimate, that's a huge win. However, the bad things about him is, well, like every other champion so far, no escapes in his kit. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially in lower ranks again, because chances are the players in that range of ELO aren't going to be utilizing or taking advantage of such a weakness to its full extent. So as long as with Malzahar especially, you push in your lane, which should be very easy to do, and then you go ahead and play safe, maybe go take a jungle camp, you won't be ganked very easily. And here are my recommended runes, items, and masteries for Malzahar. So next let's talk a little bit about Velkoz. Velkoz is one of those mages that has a ridiculous amount of damage in his kits, but is very vulnerable. But again, when we're taking out that vulnerability of him not having escape in his skit and not making it mean as much as it may in maybe higher ELO, well then this guy is actually quite deadly. He's like a machine gun type spellcaster. I mean, you miss one spell, no problem. Chances are you have 3 or 4 flying out right after that. The damage in his kit is extremely high, especially when you combine it with his passive dealing a lot of damage in true damage form. His laning phase is surprisingly actually quite good because he is fairly long range with his Q. He can wave clear with his W very easily, especially if you max it first. His E is an AoE knockback type ability, which is very strong. And I personally think he has one of the most underrated ultimates in the game because not only does it have a good range, good damage, it stacks up his passive very quickly, but on top of everything else, it slows everyone it's hitting. So when it comes to team fights, he has a decent amount of CC, whether it's a slow or an actual AoE knockback. He has ridiculously high damage. He scales somewhat okay into late game, and a lot of players won't be able to dodge your Q as effectively as they probably should. So all in all, this champion has a ridiculous amount of damage, again, his vulnerability being that he has no escape, so it's a bit easy to jump right onto him and kill him. But if the players you're facing aren't exactly the best when it comes to doing such a thing, well, you are going to be standing in the back dishing out a truckload of damage. But unfortunately for you, sometimes if you're not used to Velkoz, well, hitting the Q on the opponent is also going to be awkward for you. So it might take a little bit of practice, but it shouldn't be anything overly complex. And to end off for Velkoz, here are the runes, the masteries, and items when playing him. Here's a champion that's a little different than the ones we've been talking about, Talon. I thought it would be a good idea to include at least one AD assassin or at least one assassin champion in general in this list, just in case you're someone that really enjoys playing those type of champions. Now, it was a really close call between Talon and Fizz, but I decided to give Talon the upper hand. When it comes to assassin champions, Talon probably has among the most reliable damage outputs, on top of also having probably one of the highest AoE damage outputs in a team fight. And even though his laning phase isn't anything to to really brag about, it's not that bad either. The harass with his W is fantastic, the power spike at level 6 is immense. He has a very quick and instant gap closer being his E ability with a very nice slow. He's able to push in towers heavily, he's able to CC targets for his team, and even if you can't perfectly execute Talon's full assassination combo, chances are you're still going to be doing enough damage to kill your target. So for the most part, Talon is probably one of the easier assassins to play, but there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. So if you're an assassin player and you want to run those champions in bronze, maybe silver, or even gold, Talon is the champion that I recommend you play. The negatives is, well, at the end of the day, he's still an assassin, so he will require a bit of snowballing. But regardless, here are the runes, masteries, and items when playing Talon. Now the second last champion we'll be talking about in this video is going to be Ahri. Now surprisingly enough, when I was looking up the statistics of these champions, Ahri's win ratio wasn't as high as I thought it would be. But in my personal opinion, this is a very simple champion that is also very strong. I've always considered Ahri to be among the easier mid lane AP mages to play. She has a fantastic laning phase, giving her essentially free farm with Q if you kill the minion. She's got ridiculous amount of burst, she has wave clear, she has fantastic AoE stun initiation with her ultimate, and at the end of the day, her ultimate is a point and click AoE stun. I also feel like a lot of players won't know how to beat Ahri's laning phase because it can be very intimidating at times. And well, the secret to beating her laning phase is simply to outrange her. So at the end of the day, Ahri has to be one of the easiest champions in mid lane while also being very strong. But the negatives, like pretty much every single champion so far, no escapes in her kit, and not the best late game scaling, which can make things a little bit difficult, but her initiation is still there with the catch potential. And here are her runes, her masteries, and her items when playing Ahri. And the final 7th champion to close off the video is going to be Kale. This might be a champion that you didn't expect to see in this video, and in all honesty, not a champion I expected to talk about either. But again, when looking up the statistics for the video, well, Kale had a surprisingly good win ratio across most ELOs like gold, silver, and bronze in most regions. And when you really think about it, I mean, it does kind of make sense. This champion is not difficult to play whatsoever. In fact, you can almost consider her to be the Kog'Maw of mid lane. You get some attack speed runes, you get some attack speed items like your Nashor's and Gwynsu's Rageblade. You throw your Q on the opponent, press your E, and whack them away to death. The champion will do the work for you. She has a fairly good laning phase because she can just keep pushing in the wave and just focus on farming. She brings a lot of utility with her W and her ultimate in teamfights, a lot of damage as well, especially the longer the game goes. And for the most part, Kale is a tank and spank type champion. Not difficult to play while also being very strong and scaling very impressively. The negatives, I'm sure you already guessed, no escapes in her kit, and she does take a little bit to get going. And just like every other champion, here are the runes, the masteries, and items for playing Kale. But that about wraps it up for this video, guys. I mean, those are some 7 god tier type champions for lower elo. So what I recommend you do is pick maybe 2 or 3 of these champions, ones that you think fits your playstyle the best, and then play them in mid lane, and chances are you should have some success. Most of these champions are not difficult to play, a lot of them are very strong, especially currently in the meta. And yeah, so let me know how it goes if you end up trying it out. So if you guys end up enjoying this video, please don't forget to hit that like button. Also, make sure you share it with your friends so everyone else has an idea on what to play. Subscribe if you haven't, and make sure to check out my other videos as well. And here are my favorite answers from the previous video's question, asking you guys if you think the Kog'Maw nerfs are enough to make him balanced. But thank you all so much for watching, and I really hope to see you for the next video. Peace.